57 people have crawled out under the Berlin Wall tonight. 145 meters of tunnel, 12 meters straight down, from a toilet shed in the east, under the wall, up into a bakery cellar in the west. It is past midnight, the 4th of October, 1964. The escape is still running, and the next man waiting his turn is lying. He does not want to flee. He works for the Stasi, and he has already counted every face in the line. My name is Tom, and this is Forgotten Europe. In a few minutes, the shooting starts. A young border guard dies in that courtyard, and the students who dug this tunnel wake up the next morning to a new name printed across the East German press. Terrorists, murderers, the most wanted people in the country. There is one problem with that. It is a lie, and the proof stays buried for 26 years. Stay in that courtyard with me, because to understand the lie, you have to watch exactly what happens next. For 6 months, a man named Wolfgang Fuchs and more than 30 helpers, most of them West Berlin students, one of them a future astronaut, had been digging 145 meters by hand from the cellar of a closed bakery, under the wall toward a disused toilet in an eastern courtyard. The longest escape tunnel anyone had ever attempted. Their couriers had quietly reached around 120 people in the east and told them how to find the cellar from the wrong side. On the night of the 3rd of October, the escapes began. Person after person climbed down into the dark and came up free in the west. The second night kept working. 57 made it through. That number is why we still call it Tunnel 57. But one of those 120 contacts worked for the Stasi. Near midnight, 2 men in plain clothes walked into the courtyard. They said they wanted to flee. They said they would fetch a friend and come back. They came back with border guards. A shout, then shooting. One of the helpers, Christian Zobel, fired toward the guards. A 21-year-old border guard named Egon Schultz was hit in the shoulder and went down. And then his own side opened fire. Here is the fact East Germany buried for a generation. When the shooting stopped, Egon Schultz had been struck by 10 bullets. 1 came from the helper, the wound in the shoulder. The other 9 came from a fellow border guard's weapon, including the one that killed him. Egon Schultz was shot dead by his own side. The students in that tunnel never knew it. The guard who fired never admitted it. And when the East German state worked out what had really happened, it made a decision. It would say nothing. By morning, the papers in the East had their headline. West Berlin terrorists, they wrote, had murdered a border guard at the wall. Within days, Schultz had a martyr's funeral. And the students who dug that tunnel had a price on their heads. The most wanted people in East Germany. These students knew the truth. They had stood in that courtyard and watched it happen. But they could prove nothing. And they would wear the word murderer for the next 26 years. Whether the truth would ever surface at all came down to something no one in 1964 could have imagined. That the state accusing them would one day fall and be forced to open its own files. We will get there. Buried stories like this one are the whole reason Forgotten Europe exists. So if you want to see how it comes out, subscribe and stay with me. Because the lie is only half of it. The other half is who these students actually were. 3 years earlier, none of them were wanted by anyone. The 13th of August, 1961. Berliners wake up to soldiers, barbed wire, and torn up streets. Overnight, the city is cut in half. For about 500 young men and women, it is also the end of their studies. They live in the East. Their university, the Free University, sits in the West. The wire locks them out of their own lecture halls. The man who decides to do something about it is not a student at all. Detlef German runs the university's welfare office, grants, paperwork, foreign students, and administrator. But the people he starts sending back across that border are students. His students. Their friends. They called it the travel agency. The first trick was almost insultingly simple. A West Berlin student walked into the East on his own passport, found an East Berliner who roughly matched the photo, and handed it over. The East Berliner strolled out as a West German tourist. The student reported his passport lost and did it again. But paper was the easy part. I want you to stand at that barrier for a second. A guard takes your borrowed passport. He looks at the photo. He looks at you. He asks where you were born. And between you and a prison cell, there is nothing but 90 seconds of somebody else's memorized childhood. One wrong answer, and you do not come home. People were caught. People disappeared into rooms they never walked out of. And still, every week, the couriers went back. It got bolder. Real foreign passports, false names, faces that needed to vanish. Then the East caught on, slid a control card into every passport at the daytime crossings, and the road through the checkpoints closed, so the travel agency went under the ground. And under the ground, it turned deadly. In December of 1961, a chemistry student named Dieter Wohlfahrt went to the wire to bring a group across. He was shot and left to bleed in the strip of land where no one was allowed to reach him. He was 20. He was not the last, and almost every time one of them died, the reason was the same. Someone had talked. Because the real enemy here was never the wall. It was betrayal. Marion Detjen, who wrote the standard history of this underground, traces the same pattern across the whole period. Again and again, the networks were broken, not at the wall, but from the inside. By 1963, that is how they took German. The travel agency was so riddled with informers that it collapsed from the inside. But the underground did not die with it. The same students, the same networks, regrouped around a new name, Wolfgang Fuchs. And Fuchs wanted one thing, the longest tunnel anyone had ever dug under the wall. You already know how that ended. So these were the murderers. A welfare clerk and his students. People who memorized strangers' lives and bled out at the wire so that someone they had never met could go home. But a lie told by an entire state is heavier than the truth held by a handful of students. Egon Schultz became a national hero. Schools were named after him. Plaques went up. A generation of children in the East learned his name as the boy the Western murderers killed at the wall. The helpers were now enemies of the state, named, hunted, and denounced across the East German press as murderers and traffickers. Even the West flinched. Stern, the magazine that had secretly paid for the tunnel in exchange for the exclusive rights to the story, did not defend them. It distanced itself. Overnight, the brave students were an embarrassment, tied to a dead 21-year-old. And the ones the Stasi caught did not get a symbolic punishment. They got years in Hohenschönhausen, a prison most people had never heard of. No sleep, interrogations that ran for weeks, show trials, lives quietly filed away in a cabinet. The helpers who had stood in that courtyard knew the truth. They had watched the soldier fall under his own side's fire, but they had no autopsy, no files, nothing but their own word against a propaganda machine. So in December, a few of them did the only thing they could. They wrote a letter to Egon Schultz's mother. They told her, in their own words, that they grieved for her son and that he had not died the way the newspapers said. They tied it to balloons and floated it over the wall into the east, hoping she might somehow read it. I have thought about that gesture more than almost anything else in this story. A letter to the grieving mother of a dead enemy soldier, sent over the wall by the very men his state was branding his killers. Not a denial, not propaganda of their own. Only two things: that they were sorry, and that it had not happened the way she was told. For the moment, it changed nothing. But here is what we do know. The accusation she had been handed that these students murdered her boy was false. The men who sent that letter knew it. And so did the state that had buried the truth. For 26 years, that is where it stayed. The men who had been in that courtyard grew old, carrying a killing that was never theirs. Then, in 1989, the wall came down, and behind it stood the one thing the regime had feared more than any tunnel: its own paperwork. When the Stasi files were opened, investigators found the original reports from the night of the 4th of October, the forensic work, the ballistics. And there, in the state's own secret records, was the sentence East Germany had spent a generation hiding. Egon Schultz had been killed by fire from a fellow border guard. The men called murderers had been telling the truth the whole time. Most of them lived to watch their own enemies' files clear them, but not Christian Zobel. The helper who fired that first shot never made his peace with what happened in that courtyard. He drank. The night followed him to the end, and he died in 1992, just as the files were proving that the shot which killed Egon Schultz had never been his at all. Sit with what that means. The state did not only lie to the West, it lied to a grieving mother in the East. It handed her a hero's grave to visit and a murder that never happened. Whether she lived long enough to learn the truth, whether that balloon-born letter ever reached her, we do not know, and now never will. It built schools and monuments on a fact it knew was false. It turned an accident into a murder, and a murder into a religion, knowing exactly what its own files said. The wall did not only kill people at the wire, it took the truth from the ones left behind to grieve them. Egon Schultz was a victim, but he was a victim of the system that sent him into that courtyard, not of the students trying to get out of it. When I started reading about the travel agency, I expected a heist, passports, tunnels, clever young people outrunning the police, and that is in there. The audacity is real, but that is not what stayed with me. What stayed with me is that phrase the regime used, most wanted, because it tells you who the East German state was truly afraid of. Not soldiers, not spies, a welfare clerk, and a few hundred students with forged papers and shovels. A wall is built to keep people in, but the moment you build one, you have admitted something. You have admitted they want to leave. The students understood that better than the men who built it. They simply acted on it. Most of their names are gone now: German, Fuchs, Wolfart. Names the East worked hard to turn into curses, and then to forget. I think they are worth remembering as what they were: not terrorists, not murderers. The most wanted students behind the Berlin Wall. Because the most dangerous thing you could do in that country was help someone walk out of it. This has been Forgotten Europe. I am Tom. Thank you for watching.